Welcome to Healing Your Families. I'm Emma Lou Penrod, and I help you as a parent go from frustration, stress, and overwhelm to calm, confidence, and joy so that you can achieve the quality of family life that you desire. That's what I want for you. I am so excited for today's program. I have a very special guest, and she's going to be talking to us about legacy, and she's well qualified for this. This is Joanna Klein. She's a writer, speaker, and life coach who's been recognized as a distinguished leader in personal growth and development for more than 4 decades. She's the founder and CEO of Journey to Legacy. And she is also a show host with Win Win Women. She's on Channel 2 at 2 p.m. Pacific, so her show is just before mine on Channel 2, and her show is Thrive in Your Third Act. Joanna, welcome.
Thank you, Emma Lou. It's great to be here, and it's an honor to be here with you.
And I love that Thrive in Your Third Act, you know, that idea that we used to talk about 30 being over the hill, and now we know that's all nonsense.
Absolutely. We definitely do. Yeah.
Well, I was excited to be able to talk to you about how we can leave a priceless legacy for our families. Quite often when we talk about leaving a legacy for our families, we are thinking of life insurance or money, you know, or real estate investment. But I think there is a legacy we can leave that is far more priceless than money or anything money can buy. And as I watch your show, I think that's what you talk about on your show.
Yes. Well, my show is an invitation for women to share their stories and share practical tips with other women about, you know, their own experiences in life, and our experiences are our legacy. And so my program, my online course, Journey to Legacy, is an invitation for women to connect with what has been meaningful in their life, to really reframe their stories. So often when we look back, we have regret or shame or blame or guilt. And oftentimes we don't even really spend enough time congratulating ourselves on the great things that we've done, or remembering those joyful moments. So the opportunity to look back on our life and to really appreciate all that we've been through has made us who we are today. And if we can get to that point where we're feeling both peaceful and proud, and to recognize there's been wisdom that we've learned, and in that wisdom, what we can share, our stories can be someone else's solution. Our stories can connect future generations to us. It can connect us to past generations. So we can be weaving this golden thread by being willing to come forward and share our personal stories, and share them from a deeper perspective than just, we all went to a picnic together and served hot dogs and it was 80 degrees out and it was a fun day. No, it's more, you know, what happened at that picnic and how did it feel to be there, and what does family mean to you, and what was, you know, the experience to have your cousins, and share about those relationships, and share what you enjoy about picnics now as a result of that experience, having picnics when you were a kid.
You know, you're talking about 2 very important aspects of this journaling. First of all, you're journaling for yourself. You're gaining insights into your life, your feelings, what's important to you, your values. So, and I know the value of journaling in working through difficult emotions or trying times. So that's the first part. It benefits you. But you're also mentioning how it benefits others.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of give a little bit of a description of what life story writing is, because some people get intimidated and think they have to be a writer. It's different from journaling in that journaling is very in the moment. We're writing typically about what's happening right here and now. So we're processing our feelings. When we're doing life story writing, we're reflecting back. We've actually already, been through the event. There's time to get perspective on it. So there's a difference with life story writing in that we are going back and, those optical illusions where you see the picture of, some people see a vase, some people see profiles, it's an example of that. It's like we're going back and recognizing that everything that's happened in our life, we've made up a story about it. And some of the definitions, some of the meaning we've given to our stories serve us, and sometimes it doesn't serve us. So yes, life story writing is going back, reflecting, getting perspective, as opposed to journaling here in the moment. Life story writing isn't autobiography. Autobiography is a lot of details, fact checking, all of that. But life story writing is remembering as we remember our truth, as we remember it to be. There's no right or wrong absolute way to do it. So kind of want to clarify that. But yes, I believe, and I think my Journey to Legacy program is different from other life story writing programs in that I do take people on a journey into themselves. It's like a sacred journey to ourselves, because it's getting to know it's reconnecting with who we are, being openly curious about the things that happened, being willing to be truthful, being willing to take personal responsibility for the things that happened in our life, changing from what I call a victim mindset to an empowered mindset, where we can say, yes, this happened. It was a horrible thing that happened to me, and I got on the other side of it. And here are the strengths that came out of it for me. Here's the lessons that I've learned. I wouldn't get myself in that situation again, or if I did have it happen to me again, I know now. So it's really celebrating the things that have happened that help make us strong. And so then to the second part, which you mentioned, is in order to share our stories, it's, I believe, very important to connect with those blessings, lessons, and wisdom. That's the gift that we have to pass on. That's how we can lighten the load of those who follow. That's how we can help our children, our grandchildren, our great nieces and nephews, our great grandchildren, whether we're related by blood or related by love, there are people who follow us who can really benefit from our willingness to share what's happened for us and how we have made it through.
Well, thank you for making that distinction between journaling and writing a life story and an autobiography. That helps immensely. So, talking about writing this life story, I can see the healing properties. You know, children tend to blame themselves for anything that happens, even if it couldn't possibly be their fault, like their dad losing the job, or and so to be able to go back to that incident with adult eyes and see it, revisit it, and then realize, no, that wasn't my fault. I took on blame that wasn't appropriate. That's huge. That can really be a healing experience for someone to go through. And then to share it with your posterity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, I hear a number of different feedback that I get from the women who do the program, but that healing piece that you talked about is definitely consistent in that I feel better. I've let go of some of this weight that I've been carrying by seeing the other side. There's a lot of compassion that comes out of it, both for ourselves and for others. And so that it's such a beautiful thing. When you talk about children are so impressionable, and studies have shown, and I know you know this to be true, that the children who know where they came from, who know their family story, do better academically, socially, they're more resilient. They have that sense of who they are. And so there's a strong part of me that feel we have a responsibility to do this and to make time for this, to see it as not only something that's going to turn into this incredible gift that's going to be cherished more than that, coffee table that you're holding on to, but these stories that are going to be so cherished because those who read it and follow us are going to be able to have to own that, to feel themselves within those stories.
I, I also see the opportunity for a perspective. Sometimes we can get caught up in our own lives, especially children, teenagers, and they may feel that, their life is so unbearable. But if they read about another teenager in another time who's had to worry about finding enough food to eat, or when their only pair of shoes wore out, or it helps us gain a little perspective. And I loved what you said about knowing who we are, and that if my ancestors could get through their challenges, I can too.
Yeah, absolutely. Over and over again, I hear people in resistance to doing the life story writing. They say, my stories aren't very interesting. No one would care to read them. My life has been boring. And yet we are walking libraries. We have personal history within our stories. Many of us lived during a time when there was only black and white television, and we had some of my clients have had the operators, they had to go use the phone. They had to go through an operator in order to make a phone call. They had a party line, the
Yeah.
idea of cell phones wasn't around. Or, we've lived through obvious points in history like 9/11, or, this assassination of JFK, Martin Luther King. To be able to share our experience, like what life was like before the internet, and imagine someone reading that who's born today, like, what? There was no internet when you were a kid? Like, what did you do? And be able to broaden the perspective. They're going to read about it in the history book, but how much more powerful it will be to make it come alive when one of their relatives is sharing the experience of that.
Exactly. And what we think of as this is just a routine, everyday activity, to someone 20 years from now, it won't be. I know when I read, I was blessed to have grandparents and great grandparents who wrote their life stories. And they wrote what to them was just a mundane. I remember one entry my grandfather wrote. It was just very matter of factly, he stated that he walked 25 miles that day. And so what is mundane and everyday to us isn't going to be. And the pandemic, anyone born in 10 years will, who knows what it's going to be like. But again, that sharing these experiences, they are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what it does for them. Now, I want to share an experience I had. I visited a museum in Victoria, and it was about a family, and they explained that this family had gone from rags to riches and back to rags in 3 generations. And I was just so intrigued by this the museum had at one time been the family mansion. It was huge. It was amazing, the lavish lifestyle they lived. And the head of this family was a couple, immigrants, moved to Canada, struggled, sacrificed, built a huge thriving business. And then, of course, trained their children in this business. But there was contention and a breakdown in communication. You know, mother and son went for decades without speaking to each other. And then the next generation grew up in this wealth, expected it. The one display stated there was only one person in that generation who had the self-discipline and the work ethic to keep the business going. Mm-hmm. But he died as a foot soldier during World War I. Mm-hmm. And none of that other generation had passed on the business, the wealth, but not that work ethic, not the character, the integrity. Mm. And family returned. Yeah, it's sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a lost opportunity. Well, I have a personal experience. Like when my mother passed away at the age of 91 in 2014, and then the following year, my sister, my only sibling, who was 5 years older, passed away at the age of 67. She had cancer. And so all of the family possessions ended up with me. And going through, I found this letter from my father's mother. And this was written in 2018. She was pregnant with my father. That was the year of the Spanish flu, the pandemic.
So it was 1918.
Sorry, 1918. Thank you for that. So 1918, she was pregnant with my father, and she died 5 months after she gave birth to my father. Oh. And in this letter, she talks about, she says, so while there is life, we must prepare for death. And she's writing this letter to my grandfather, my father's father, and asking him to do certain things with her possessions, her photographs, her jewelry. And she says that if a daughter survives me, I want all of my photographs of myself and family kept for her. And when she is old enough to be told of her family, so the little soul will be proud, although no mother to tell her so. And I was so struck by that, because what in fact happened is my father was born, and this was in Reno, Nevada. He was sent to the East Coast to be cared for by some relatives there. At the age of 6, he was put on a train by himself with a tag on him that said, "Feed me." And he came across country on this train by himself to go be with his father, who still couldn't care for him, and put him into foster homes. And he was beaten in those homes. My father had a miserable life. His own father passed away when he was 16. He did end up back east with relatives, was able to get an education in high school, was able to go to college, and really what he overcame was huge. But I carried a lot of anxiety. My father and I didn't have a good relationship. He had anxiety. He was obviously had a troubled childhood. And so we were disconnected for throughout our life, even until the time he passed away. We still weren't able to reconnect. But by writing the story about him and connecting with this letter and realizing I don't know a thing about his mother, that's all I have. And she's saying about wanting the daughter to feel proud. And I just wonder, what would it have been like if those stories had been written? So my dad had something to feel proud about, even though he was sent away. And, you know, who knows if it would have changed anything for him. But there's nothing, not ancestry.com doesn't give any clues about my grandmother. There's nothing that I can find. But here she wanted the stories to be shared. You know, she wanted her husband to be the one to share them. So it's like I cherish this letter, and it's so sad. It's like, did she know she was going to, how did she know she was going to die? Or she talks about, she was a nurse. So it sounded like she was feeling called to serve and maybe knew the potential. And at that time, the deaths during birth were a lot higher than they are now. So all of those things could have played a part, but those are answers those are questions I'll never have the answer to.
Wow, but what a blessing to have that letter, that one record you have of your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
precious
Yeah. It does create connection. And also the fact that we've now lived through the pandemic. So, 1918 here, 2020.
2018 was, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's like their history repeating itself. I remember knowing that she died during the Spanish flu, the pandemic, and thinking, well, thank goodness we're beyond that.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Now, I understand you offer a service that helps people write their life story.
Yes. That's what Journey to Legacy is about. It's an online course. It's live. We take just a small group of women through this journey. It's a 12-week course, and helping them uncover, reconnect with their stories, help them reframe their stories. And I've even created a writing platform for them to be able to go write the stories, organize them, and put them together in a legacy journal so that they can share these stories. And it's set up so that they can share their stories in a variety of ways. They can create several different legacy journals in the form of an ebook if they wanted to share different stories with different family members. But there's a lot of inspiration there to help them write. And I also offer what I call the deeper questions. So there are writing prompts, but then with each writing prompt are additional questions like, why is this story significant? What did you learn from this? Or how did this shape who you are today? So questions that can help people who think they wouldn't know how to do this, help them go deeper. Plus there are live lectures, tutorials, and one-on-one coaching that supports people through the process. So whether people think they're a writer or not a writer, you don't have to be a writer to take this course. You just need to be an explorer.
Well, now we have programs that you can just speak and it prints it. I'm not sure what it.
Transcribers, yeah, voice
Yes.
transcribers.
Do you ever have anyone who uses that type of
Absolutely. Some people prefer handwriting than using the computer. But obviously, if you're going to share it, you need to get it to electronic format. So, we have the tools for teaching how to use a voice transcriber, how to make the use of that, and then transforming that into what it is that you're going to share.
Now, you mentioned handwriting. Are there benefits to writing it out by hand?
It's very personal. Now, depending on who you talk to, Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way and encourages in the morning what she calls morning pages, and she says the best way to do it is handwritten. And many people I know feel like that's the only way to write is handwritten. I have no problem being on a computer, typing and writing my story. And most of my clients are absolutely fine to do that. So I haven't seen it be a detriment, but some people prefer it. And so that's wonderful. If they do, there's no rules on how to do it. Just get your story out. And then there are certainly ways to convert it to make it electronic so it's easier to share.
And in your own words, I think, your grandmother wrote that letter in her own words.
Mm.
And it tells you something of her personality, of her character.
That's such a great point, because that's another thing that people are worried. I can't do this because I'm not going to do it right. I don't know how to go about doing that. But it's truly about being in your own voice. whether you are great at grammar or punctuation, none of that matters. It's letting people, it's being seen, it's letting yourself be seen. And there's this huge piece of self-worth and self-acceptance that comes out of being in a journey, on a journey like this. That's probably the number one thing I hear is, I feel good about myself. I feel like my life has been worthy. I get the meaning now in a new way. And you need that in order to be able to share and create and share that legacy with others. You need to have that understanding in order to share the pride.
I think too often, as adults or parents, it's so important for us to look good, and we don't realize, especially when teenage children become teenagers, they only relate to us when we are vulnerable, when we admit we don't always know, we admit we make mistakes. And if we try to maintain this facade of, oh, I don't have any problems, it actually alienates them.
Mhm.
So I can see how important it is to be genuine, to be real, to be sincere.
And
And
it's hard. It can be hard for us to go there. It's, we have to be real and honest with ourselves first. And sometimes there's shame and guilt that's covering up. So there's something about sharing the story, whether it's on, like I have on my show, we're sharing stories, but in my Journey to Legacy program, we're sharing stories in the group, and there's this affirming experience that happens there.
I also like the idea, again, a benefit for the individual who writes their life story is, again, that perspective. It's human nature to just focus on our mistakes, the things we did wrong, and we just kind of brush over our achievements. But by doing this, we're put in a position where we are required to take an objective view of everything we have done and acknowledge that we did achieve things. We did help others and do good. And I think that would also be empowering.
Yeah, that's a big part of the program, is focusing on what we did well. It's it's really it's really diving into that. It's very much diving into that and stop beating ourselves up, getting a whole new handle on our self-critic.
And I think that is what true humility is we think it means that you look down on yourself, but I think it means to see yourself as you really are, the good and the bad, and then knowing that you can take steps to improve areas in your life that need improvement, but also recognizing your value,
Mhm.
your worth.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
love it.
We all are worthy. We all are worthy of sharing our stories. And there's someone who's going to be touched by your story.
Yes, and you could have just the answer they need, just the inspiration or encouragement that they need.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
love it. So, Joanna, how do people contact you?
They can go to my website, journeytolegacy.com. I have a free gift there, Write Your Authentic Story Starter Kit. So they can sign up for that and start getting their juices going, start remembering things, and start the process and see how it feels. And they can also come to my show, Thrive in Your Third Act, which is just before yours. So 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. Pacific time on Channel 2.
Yes, yes. And I love what you're doing. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time in joining me today.
Thank you for having me today, Emily. I love what you're doing as well. Such a powerful force and message that you have to give. So appreciate that. It's important.
All right. Well, I want to encourage you. We have a lot of amazing show hosts. Joanna is one just before mine. Janine's voice she's on Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. Pacific time. And she's been talking about forgiveness, and her next show will be about finding your purpose after you've experienced the power of forgiveness. And that includes forgiving yourself as well as forgiving others. And thank you so much for joining us. And remember, come back again next week at the same time. And until then, love yourself, love your families. Remember, we're making the world a better place by strengthening families, one family at a time. This is Emmalou Penrod at Healing Your Families. And if you're here live, we invite you to join us for our Q&A.